There is a kind of pain that does not come from strangers. It does not arrive in the form of an accident, a diagnosis, or a sudden loss. It comes slowly, quietly, and it comes wearing the face of someone you have loved your entire life. It comes from the people who were supposed to be your safe place. The people who were supposed to show up without question, without condition, and without hesitation. And for a woman named Patricia Coleman, that pain did not come from the world outside. It came from inside her own family's front door. Or more accurately, it came from that door never opening at all. Patricia was 51 years old when she made a decision that would shatter everything she thought she knew about the people closest to her. She was not in crisis. She was not desperate. She was simply tired. Tired of wondering, tired of giving, and tired of the quiet suspicion that had been building inside her for years. The suspicion that the love surrounding her was not love at all, that it was convenience, that it was access, that the moment she had nothing left to offer, the people who called themselves her family would simply walk away. So Patricia decided to find out, not by asking, not by confronting, but by disappearing, piece by piece, and watching what happened when she did. What she discovered would leave her sitting alone on the floor of a bare apartment, crying not from grief, but from the terrifying clarity of finally knowing the truth. And what her mother did, the one person on this earth Patricia never once doubted, is the part of this story that will stay with you long after this video ends. Before we go any further, before we walk through every moment of what Patricia uncovered and every door that stayed closed when she needed it most, I want you to ask yourself something. If someone you loved called you right now, tonight, and told you they had lost their job, lost their apartment, and had nowhere to go, what would you do? Most people watching this right now believe, with complete certainty, that they would step up, that they would open their home, open their wallet, or at the very minimum pick up the phone. Most people believe that about themselves. And most people, if they are being honest, have never actually been tested. Patricia Coleman tested the people around her. And what came back was something she was never prepared for. Who is Patricia Coleman, and what drove a grown woman, a successful, independent woman, to stage the collapse of her own life just to see who would catch her? What did her siblings do when the calls started coming in? What did her closest friends do when she said she had nothing left? And what did her mother, the woman who raised her, the woman she had protected and supported and loved without reservation for 5 decades, what did her mother do when Patricia needed her most? Those are the questions at the heart of this story, and every single answer is more painful than the last. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what Patricia did and why she did it, you have to understand who Patricia Coleman was before the test. You have to understand the life she built, the role she played in her family, and the slow accumulation of moments that eventually brought her to a place where she felt she had no choice but to find out the truth for herself. Patricia was born and raised in a mid-sized city in the American Midwest. She was the second of 4 children, the responsible one, the dependable one, the one the family called when something needed to be handled. Her mother, Dorothy Coleman, was a proud, image-conscious woman who had raised her children largely on her own after Patricia's father left the family when Patricia was just 9 years old. Dorothy worked long hours and kept a clean house and a respectable reputation in the community, and she raised her children to do the same. She was not a warm woman in the way that some mothers are warm. She was not the kind of mother who held you and told you everything would be fine. She was the kind of mother who expected strength, expected performance, and expected the family to present well to the outside world no matter what was happening behind closed doors. Patricia absorbed all of that. From the time she was a young girl, she understood her role. She was the daughter who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and made Dorothy proud. She was the sibling who helped the younger ones with homework, who stepped in during arguments, who smoothed things over when the family tension became too thick to breathe through. She was, in every sense of the word, the family's foundation. And like most foundations, she was taken for granted in ways that nobody ever acknowledged out loud. By her early 30s, Patricia had built a life that most people would genuinely envy. She had worked her way up through the healthcare administration field and eventually landed a senior management position at a regional hospital network in Ohio. She owned her own home, a modest but well-maintained house in a quiet neighborhood, and she drove a reliable car, paid her bills on time, and had a small but meaningful savings account that she had built through years of careful, intentional living. She was not wealthy, but she was stable, and in her family, stable meant something. In her family, stable meant you were the one people called when they needed something. And they called. They called often. Patricia's older brother, Marcus, had never quite found his footing financially, and over the years Patricia had quietly bailed him out more times than she could count. A few $100s here, a month's rent there, a loan that was always going to be paid back, but never quite was. Patricia's younger sister, Renee, had 2 children and a complicated relationship with their father, and when things fell apart between them, it was Patricia who drove 4 hours to help Renee move, who took the kids for weeks at a time, and who provided the kind of steady, reliable presence that held that side of the family together. And then there was Dorothy, their mother, who had a habit of presenting herself as completely self-sufficient to the outside world while quietly relying on Patricia for everything from grocery runs to help with medical appointments to an envelope of cash on the occasional month when her fixed income came up short. Patricia gave all of this willingly. She was not the kind of person who kept score, or at least she told herself she was not. But somewhere in the back of her mind, in the quiet space between giving and giving again, a question had taken root. A question she was almost afraid to say out loud, even to herself. If the situation were reversed, if it were her who needed something, really needed something, would any of these people show up the way she had always shown up for them? She pushed the question down for years. She buried it under generosity and obligation and the belief that family simply did not work that way, that you did not put people to the test, that you simply trusted and you gave and you hoped. But the question would not stay buried forever. The event that finally brought it to the surface happened on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday in March. Patricia had been dealing quietly with a health scare, nothing ultimately serious, but frightening enough in the weeks before her test results came back to make her genuinely consider her own mortality. She had mentioned it, briefly and vulnerably, to her mother during one of their weekly phone calls. Dorothy's response was not what Patricia had needed. There was no pause of concern. There was no rush of warmth or reassurance. Dorothy's first response was to pivot to her own aches, her own appointments, her own situation. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said, "Well, I'm sure it's nothing. You've always been strong." Patricia sat with the phone in her hand after the call ended and did not move for a long time. She was not angry in that moment. She was something quieter and more devastating than anger. She was certain that the question she had been pushing down for years deserved a real answer. And she decided, right then, that she was going to find out. Patricia did not rush into what came next. She thought about it carefully for nearly 3 weeks before she made her first move. She considered the ethics of it, the practicality of it, and the very real possibility that what she uncovered might change her relationships forever. She was not trying to punish anyone. She was not looking for an excuse to pull away from the people she loved. She genuinely wanted to be wrong. She wanted to make the calls and discover that her family was exactly who she had always hoped they were, that when she said she needed help, they would come running, and that all of her quiet doubts would dissolve into relief and gratitude and the warm, solid knowledge that she was truly loved. That was the outcome she was hoping for. It was not the outcome she received. Patricia's plan was methodical. She would not stage a single dramatic event. She would do it gradually, the way real financial and personal collapse actually happens, not all at once, but piece by piece, phone call by phone call, revelation by revelation. She would give each person in her circle the opportunity to respond before she moved to the next stage. She documented everything, every conversation, every text message, every interaction. In a private journal she kept locked on a secondary phone. She wanted a record, not to use against anyone, but because she needed to know that what she was experiencing was real, that she was not imagining it, that the pattern she suspected was actually there. The first call went to Marcus. Patricia told her brother that she had received a performance review at work that had gone badly, that there were layoffs coming and she might be one of them, and that she was starting to worry about her finances. She was careful to keep her tone steady, not panicked, not dramatic, just genuinely concerned and reaching out. Marcus listened, or at least he was quiet while she talked, which Patricia had always assumed was the same thing. When she finished, Marcus said, "That's rough, Pat. I'm sure you'll figure it out though." You always do. And then he pivoted to telling her about a business idea he had been working on and whether she might be interested in investing a little. Patricia wrote it down in her journal. She did not say anything about it to Marcus. She just wrote it down, and she moved on to the next call. The call to Renee came 2 days later. Patricia told her sister that the layoff had been confirmed. She had officially lost her job. Renee expressed the appropriate sympathy in the moment. She said, "Oh my God, Patricia, that's terrible, and are you okay?" In the way that people ask, "Are you okay?" when they are not entirely sure they want a detailed answer. Patricia said she was okay, but that she was going to need to figure out some things quickly, and she hinted, gently, that she might need some support over the coming weeks. Renee said, "Of course, whatever you need." She said it the way people say it when they are 90% certain you will never actually ask for anything specific. And then she changed the subject to her children's school schedules. Patricia wrote that down too. Over the following 2 weeks, Patricia escalated the scenario in carefully measured increments. She told Marcus and Renee that she had missed a mortgage payment. She told 2 of her closest friends, women she had known for over a decade, women she had shown up for through divorces and illness and loss, that she was behind on bills and struggling to keep the lights on. She told Dorothy that she was scared, that for the first time in her adult life, she did not know how she was going to manage. She waited after each conversation with the stillness of someone watching a door, wondering whether it would open. The responses that came back were a masterclass in the distance between what people say and what they actually do. Marcus sent a text the day after the mortgage conversation that said, "Hang in there, sis, you got this." He did not call. He did not offer to come by. He did not offer money, or a meal, or even an hour of his time. He sent a text message with a sun emoji and disappeared back into his own life. Renee called once, 4 days later, and spent most of the conversation talking about how hard things had been for her lately. The kids, the ex, the job she was thinking about leaving. Until Patricia gently steered the conversation back to her own situation, at which point Renee said, "I know. It's just so much for everyone right now, isn't it?" One of her friends, a woman named Sandra, someone Patricia had driven to chemotherapy appointments 3 years earlier, responded to Patricia's message about her financial situation with a string of heart emojis and a recommendation for a financial counseling app she had heard about on a podcast. Patricia stared at that message for a long time. She stared at it and thought about the hours she had spent in hospital waiting rooms, and she wrote in her journal simply, "She sent me an app recommendation." The other close friend, a woman named Brenda, went quiet altogether. One read receipt. No response. Nothing. But it was the call to Dorothy that Patricia returned to again and again in the weeks that followed. The call she had been both dreading and, in some quiet, desperate part of herself, still hoping might be different from all the rest. Patricia called her mother on a Wednesday evening. She told Dorothy everything she had told the others, and then she went further. She said she might lose the house. She said she had been lying awake at night. She said she was more frightened than she had been in a long time, and that she did not know what to do. She said all of this slowly, clearly, without drama, the way a person speaks when they genuinely need to be heard. Dorothy listened, and when Patricia finished, there was a pause, not the pause of someone gathering themselves to offer comfort, but the pause of someone calculating. And then Dorothy spoke, and what she said was not, "I am here for you," or "Come home," or even "What do you need?" What Dorothy said, in a tone that was careful and controlled and somehow colder than any silence could have been, was, "Patricia, you need to be very careful about who you tell this to. People talk. I don't want the family looking like it's falling apart." Patricia did not respond right away. She sat with the phone pressed to her ear and felt something inside her go very, very still. Her mother's first and primary concern, upon hearing that her daughter was frightened and financially collapsing, was the family's reputation. Not her daughter. The image. Patricia wrote 3 words in her journal that night. She wrote, "She chose appearances." In the days that followed that phone call, Patricia pushed the scenario into its final, most difficult stage. She told Dorothy, Marcus, and Renee that she was going to have to leave her house, that she had a few weeks before she needed to be out, that she was looking at her options. She made it clear, without stating it in words, that she had nowhere to go. She gave each of them the space and the information necessary to respond. She made it easy for them to step up. She removed every possible excuse in advance. And she waited. Marcus called 3 days later, not to offer help, but to ask if Patricia, given that she was going to be moving anyway, might have some furniture she no longer needed. He was thinking about setting up a proper home office and had seen some pieces at her place he had always liked. Patricia sat in the silence after that question for what felt like a very long time. She said she would think about it. She ended the call. She picked up her journal, and she wrote Marcus's name and underlined it twice, and then she put the pen down and did not write anything else. Renee, for her part, went largely unreachable during this period. She was dealing with something with the kids, she said in a brief text. She would check in soon. She did not check in soon. Dorothy called twice during this period. The first call was brief and practical. She asked Patricia whether she had looked into programs for people in financial hardship, mentioning a church assistance fund she had heard about from someone in her Bible study group. The suggestion was not without some practical intent, perhaps, but it was the suggestion of someone pointing a struggling person toward an institutional resource rather than the response of a mother whose child was in crisis. The second call from Dorothy was the one that Patricia would later describe. In the journal she kept through all of this, as the moment she understood fully and finally what she was dealing with. Dorothy had spoken to someone, she did not say who had apparently made a comment about Patricia's situation. Someone in the extended family or community orbit had heard something, and Dorothy was upset. She was not upset on Patricia's behalf. She was upset that word had gotten out. She told Patricia, in a voice that was quiet but unmistakably taut with displeasure, "I wish you hadn't said anything to people, Patricia. This reflects on all of us." Patricia asked her mother what exactly she thought her daughter should do. Stay silent about being in crisis so that the family's image remained intact? Dorothy did not answer that question directly. Instead, she said, "I just hope you're being smart about this." And then she said she had to go because her show was coming on. Patricia hung up the phone, and for the first time since the test had begun, she cried. Not the careful, controlled tears of someone who expected this. The deep, unwilling tears of someone who had, despite everything, still held on to the smallest possible hope that they were wrong. She had wanted to be wrong about her mother more than she had wanted to be wrong about anyone else. Because a mother is different. A mother is the original relationship, the one from which all others derive their sense of what love looks like and what it is supposed to feel like. And if that relationship is hollow, if even that relationship is conditional and image-driven and ultimately about the mother rather than the child, then something in the story of your own life has to be rewritten. Patricia sat on the floor of her living room, her real living room, in her real house, which she had not actually lost, and she cried until there was nothing left to cry. And then she opened her journal and she wrote, very carefully, what she intended to do next. Patricia did not make a dramatic announcement. She did not gather everyone in a room and confront them all at once. She handled it the way she had always handled difficult things, directly, one conversation at a time, and with a great deal more composure than most people would have managed under the circumstances. She called Marcus first. She told him the truth, that she had not lost her job, that her house was fine, that she had staged the whole thing to understand how the people closest to her would respond when she was in genuine need. Marcus's reaction moved quickly from confusion to defensiveness to something that edged toward anger. He said she had manipulated him. He said it was not fair to test people without their knowledge. He said, "You can't just do that to family, Patricia." Patricia listened to all of it. And then she said, quietly, "Marcus, when I told you I was losing my house, you called to ask about my furniture." Marcus did not have an answer for that. The call ended shortly after. Renee's reaction was more emotional. She cried,
Patricia, I'm so
and her
sorry.
tears were genuine,
I
and
feel for
Patricia
you.
believed that some of her sister's distress was actual remorse. But even through the tears, Renee said things that revealed more than she likely intended. Things about how busy she had been, how overwhelmed, how she had been meaning to call but the time had just gotten away from her. All of it landing, in its own way, as a set of explanations rather than an apology. Patricia was not interested in explanations. She was interested in the truth, and the truth had already been recorded in her journal, night by night, unanswered call by unanswered call. The conversation with Dorothy was the last one. Patricia saved it for last deliberately. She needed the others to be behind her before she faced this one. She called her mother on a Sunday afternoon. the same time of week they had always spoken, the familiar rhythm of their relationship preserved even now, at the end of it. Patricia told her mother what she had done and why she had done it. She told her about the journal, about the documented responses, about the furniture request and the app recommendation and the panic about the family's reputation. She told Dorothy what she had felt on the night of that second phone call, when her mother had expressed more concern about a neighbor's opinion than about whether her daughter had a roof over her head. And then Patricia stopped talking and gave her mother room to respond. Dorothy was silent for a moment, and then she said something that Patricia had not expected and was not prepared for, not because it was cruel, exactly, but because of how completely and perfectly it revealed everything. Dorothy said, "You had no right to put me through that kind of worry. Not, I'm sorry I let you down. Not, I should have been there for you. Not even, I don't know what to say." What Dorothy said, in the final accounting of a test designed to measure love, was that Patricia had been unfair to her, that the pain of the story belonged to Dorothy. Even here, even now, even when the curtain had been pulled back and the light was shining directly on the reality of what had happened, Dorothy Coleman's first instinct was to protect Dorothy Coleman. Patricia said, "I love you, Mom." And she meant it. That was the most heartbreaking part of all. She still meant it. "But I needed to know," she said. "And now I do." She ended the call and sat in the quiet of her real home, in the life she had never actually lost, and she thought about what it means to be loved and what it means to only think you are. Patricia Coleman did not end her relationships with her family after what she discovered. That is perhaps the most nuanced and human part of this entire story. She did not make declarations or deliver ultimatums. She did not cut anyone off or issue statements of permanent estrangement. What she did was adjust, quietly, carefully, and with the clear-eyed awareness of someone who finally knows exactly what they are working with. She pulled back the financial generosity that had defined her role in the family for decades, not out of spite, not as punishment, but because she finally understood, with the kind of bone-deep certainty that only truth can produce, that she had been giving to people who would not give back. And she decided that her resources, her time, her money, her emotional energy, deserved to go toward relationships that were genuinely reciprocal. She kept the journal. She still has it. And every so often, when she is tempted to doubt herself, when the old habits of generosity and accommodation pull at her, she reads back through those pages. The text from Marcus with the sun emoji. The read receipt from Brenda that was never followed by a message. The words her mother said about reputation when Patricia said she was scared. She reads them not to stay angry, but to stay honest. Because the greatest gift that test gave her, the unexpected, painful, irreplaceable gift, was clarity. The kind of clarity that most people spend their entire lives never quite reaching, because it requires a courage that is not comfortable and a willingness to face a truth that changes everything. There is something worth sitting with in this story that goes beyond Patricia Coleman's family. There is a question that lives at the center of it that belongs to all of us. Most of us move through our lives surrounded by people we assume love us, family members, friends, partners, and we never put that assumption to the test because testing it feels cruel or presumptuous or simply too frightening to consider. We give and give and give, and we tell ourselves that generosity is its own reward, that love does not need to be proven, that family is family no matter what. And sometimes that is absolutely true. Sometimes, if you made those calls, if you told the people around you that you had lost everything, they would show up at your door with arms full and hearts open, and you would never have any reason to doubt them again. Sometimes that is exactly what would happen. But sometimes it would not. Sometimes the silence would be deafening. Sometimes the response would be a sun emoji and a furniture request. Sometimes your mother would worry about what the neighbors think. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to know the truth, even when the truth is the thing you most hoped you would never find. Patricia Coleman wanted to be wrong. She made those calls hoping to hang up the phone feeling foolish for ever having doubted the people she loved. That was the outcome she wanted. It was not the outcome she received. And in the space between what she hoped for and what she found, she discovered something that none of us are ever truly prepared for. The freedom that comes on the other side of knowing exactly who loves you and who only loves what you can do for them. So here is the question Patricia is still sitting with today. The question she says she turns over in her mind late at night when the house is quiet. It is not a question about her family. It is a question she is asking all of us. If you called the people closest to you tonight, if you told them you had nothing left, would they show up? And if you are not completely certain of the answer, what does that uncertainty tell you about the relationships you have been choosing to protect? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what you think about what Patricia did, whether you believe she was right to test her family, and whether you think her mother's reaction was something you have encountered in your own life. Your comments are some of the most powerful and honest conversations happening anywhere online, and we read every single one. And if this story moved you the way we believe it will, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most important conversations we never have with the people around us start because someone else's story gave us the courage to start asking our own questions. Patricia's story is not just her story. It belongs to everyone who has ever given everything and wondered, in the quiet between giving and giving again, whether any of it would ever come back. Do not forget to subscribe so you never miss our next story. Because if you thought this was powerful, and we believe you did, wait until you hear what happened to the woman who discovered the truth about her family in a way she never could have anticipated. That story is coming very soon, and it will stay with you just as long as this one has. We will see you there.